And well, I won't give it away, but that's always been my kind of stopping point. Like who do I tell about this? Because like black kids don't go through stuff like this. Who do I tell?
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they're actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
Whatever it is, it looks every bit like a fairy and very little like anything else.
But seriously, it kind of looks like a fairy. Just kind of doesn't look like your standard moth.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
But I wasn't going to make this video until I looked a little bit closer and I realized after it lands behind my bench, it disappears. And it just vanishes. And in fact, I went outside to look, to try to find it, to see if it was trash, to see if it was a bug, to see if it was a leaf, like trying to figure out what it could be, and it was gone. It just vanished.
What's that? Yeah. What's what? Yeah, look. Right up there. Insect or something.
Is that an insect? Let's have a look. What is it?
I don't know. Oh my god!
Oh.
What happens to people who cut down fairy films?
Did you see it? Huh? Did you see it?
Yeah, me and him saw it.
What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious. Did you see anything land in your backyard?
The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're going to be joined by Monique. Monique is talking with us from Miami, Florida, and she's had an interesting experience with a fairy when she was a young girl. Monique, hi, how you doing tonight? I'm really well, thank you very much. Now, I know that we were talking a little bit earlier, and I had a chance to tell you about my experience, but I have not yet heard about your experience. So, I know, Monique, that this was a while ago, getting onto many years ago, which is fine. But if you could, what I would ask that you could do for myself and for the audience is just, sort of walk us into your first experience. What I mean by that is just sort of what was going on. You can tell us how old you were approximately if you'd like, where you were, that kind of stuff, and just sort of walk the audience into your first experience, please.
Okay, so I'm not originally from Miami. I'm actually from New York, and as far as New York is concerned, the ghetto, basically, for all intents and purposes. I was born and raised in the South Bronx. And so going through this experience, just to give you more of a macro view of how I'm coming into this, when I was a kid, there were no storybooks with brown kids who interacted with fairies. So, I'm in my 50s now. As I'm going through life, I'm always kind of revisiting this situation and thinking, did I really go through this? Because I don't have any point of reference. I know I went through it because it always stuck out in my head, but it was so odd to me that I had nobody to relate to. And so I kind of, I would tell people that I was really close to and people who knew about the kinds of things that happened to me because this was like one thing in a string of like occurring incidences, up until this very day. Just like kind of strange things that have happened to me. So anyway, I'm maybe like 4 years old. I know I'm not, I went to Catholic school from first to eighth grade. So I know I was not in Catholic school yet. I was still in preschool. And I remember how it started is that I'm in the bathroom and I'm getting ready to take a bath. What I remember is that the lights got low. The lights got really low in the bathroom. And apparently there was a fairy that I must have been seeing prior to this incident. Because when I saw her, and I remember this part, I don't remember anything of seeing her prior to this. I don't remember seeing anything after of this particular fairy. But I remember looking up to my right, and there she was. And I was so happy. I was so happy to see her. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're back. We're talking and I don't remember exactly what we're talking about. I'm thinking I'm telling her, I was at school and, I drew this picture and I was playing. And at the end of the conversation, she says to me, I can't see you anymore. Like, this is going to be the last time I get to see you. And I remember the emotional intensity of like, well, why not? And I don't remember what she said at that point, but I just remember sitting there and feeling really, really sad about that. And after she explained the situation, why it is she couldn't come, again, I don't remember. She told me, be a good girl, be a good girl, and that was it. That was the extent of what I remembered of that incident. For a while, as I got older, I often like went back to that moment. And I thought to myself, did I make that up? Like, did that really happen? And I'm like, it had to happen because like it's such a vivid memory for me. There's like only a few things that I remember in that age range. I remember like a few key moments in my life. It's not like I have a blow by blow playbook of what my life looked like when I was 4 years old. But that memory is so ingrained. Like I said, I'm 50 something years old now, and I just can't shake that feeling. And every so often it kind of bubbles up to the surface. And I'm like, man, who do I talk about? Who do I talk to about me being this Black girl who lived in the South Bronx? Who do I talk to say, I saw a fairy? And it wasn't a brown fairy. It was literally like a white fairy. It didn't even match who I was. It was like who it was. And it wasn't like, I won't say, I know most people see fairies and they're like relatively small. This one was maybe like a foot tall, and she had a glow around her. And she had this black hair and it looked kind of like an old fashioned kind of hairdo. Hard to explain, but I just know that she was brilliantly bright, because the light in the bathroom had, like I said, dimmed down. And I just remember it was really, really brilliant. And, she's talking to me and she seemed so happy for me. She seemed like she was proud of me for some reason. And it, like, I don't know. I guess that's why it's such an emotional like experience for me in that, me looking back and thinking like, wow, like that's something that I lost and, it really sticks out in my head.
Monique, thank you very much for taking us into that encounter. I have a lot of empathy for people that are trying to describe incredible experiences. As we were speaking earlier, I'm sure you can, sort of reflect for the listeners who weren't part of that conversation. I also struggle to describe some aspects of what I experienced, very much so. Something that I want to sort of add, not to talk about my own experiences too much. When you were talking about having very sort of distinct standout memories from that time in your life, I can remember very distinctly sort of one or two things from the time that I was around 4 or 5. I have a really distinct memory of trick-or-treating and standing on sort of a raised steps and knocking on the door, and someone opening the door which swung outward and knocking me off the steps. And I mean, I can remember that like it was funny looking back on it, yes, but I can remember that very distinctly. Like I can remember, the feeling of the door, the sound of it. There's an emotional component to that memory which is very clear. And if you asked me to remember other things from that time in my life, I would have a difficult time. And so for that reason, when you speak about how this memory has stuck with you, I feel that there's a lot of value in people hearing that, because I think others listening will also have experiences that predate their rational cognitive processes somewhat. Like as an adult, you might be able to easily say, oh, I took an Ambien and I was tired that day or something, not saying that you take any Ambien or anything like that, but there's a rational part of the human mind that can sort of rationalize it away. But a child's mind is a little bit more pure in many respects, and I think that there is a distinction between what we can recall as being something we imagined or did for fun and something that we experienced. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you some questions, if I could. So with regards to the light and the shine, I know it can be difficult to describe the light that's associated with these experiences, but could you do your best for the audience to describe the light as best you could, please?
Okay. So it's not a light that it shines from the outside. I've seen it only a few key times in my life since then, and it's always different. Like that light that I saw with the fairy is different from lights that I've seen at other times with other kind of, supernatural kind of moments that I've experienced. But it's always like an internal. It's kind of like the glow is coming from inside, but there's glitter mixed with it, is the best way that I can explain it. It's kind of like there's a flashlight inside, but not like a regular flashlight, like the brightest flashlight you can possibly imagine. And let's say you put glitter, like glitter into that flashlight, and the glitter is kind of like mixed with TV static. So if you put the TV on a channel that didn't have a show on it, it was just staticky. Imagine that static coming through the brightest light with glitter in it. That's like and I literally just thought of that maybe like 2 days ago, because I was like, what is that color that I see? And I kept thinking, I got to be able to articulate that. So it's so funny that you should even ask me that, because I just came up with that just a couple days ago, because I saw something else that was a little strange a couple days ago. And I'm like, what is that? How do I explain that? So that's precisely what it looks like. It's just an internal, for me, an internal glow that takes up all of the space in the room. So
I think you did a very good job there. And
Thank you.
I've been having a hard time describing certain aspects of what I experienced that involved the visual component and the light component. And the part about the television static mixed with luminescence is very, I'm getting goosebumps as I say it now.
Okay.
Yeah, that was very, I think that's a very good description because it's evocative of something I've been having a hard time trying to put words to as well.
Yes, the color, it's difficult. It took me, I've had incidences all throughout the years. I could never, all I could ever say was that it was an internal glow. But then I saw some static on TV and I was like, that's the color. Like, that's it with brightness attached to it with glitter.
If I may,
Hmm.
and I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
The light. When you say light, it sort of you think to yourself as a listener, oh, like a light beam. But what I think both you and I are trying to describe has more of a movement and reality being altered with type of element.
Yes, yes.
This is what I like about your television static analogy is it sort of captures visually the component that I experienced anyway of the reality seeming to deconstruct somewhat as part of its.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely, it's hard to put that part into words. I think that's probably one of the harder parts to put into words.
I think you're right, actually, Monique. And I really appreciate this conversation with you because you've really unlocked something for me just right now in terms of my understanding.
Good, 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 good.
So may I ask you some more questions if that's okay? Please?
Sure.
Okay. Now, you described some communication with yourself and the fairy.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, before I ask you about communication, you mentioned it was about 1 foot tall, and I have heard that before, just to let you know. I think they seem to vary in size and presentation depending on, well, who knows why they show at different sizes, but there seems to be some fluctuation in that. Now, may I go back to communication? So if you could you do your best for myself and for the audience to help us understand how the communication was taking place, please?
I was speaking out loud. Like, this wasn't mental communication. This wasn't like, this is in my imagination I'm talking. This was like, I'm talking out loud. I'm looking up into the corner of the bathroom and I'm talking to her out loud. So it wasn't, this is why I'm so like, I've always just had this feeling of just feeling confuzzled. Like, what was I talking to? Because I had a full-on conversation, and I like that to me is like, how do I reconcile this? Like, what was I talking to? I wasn't just talking. I didn't have imaginary friends when I was a kid. I didn't have any of that. So it wasn't even like, oh yeah, that's my imaginary friend, Patty. No. I didn't have that wasn't the way my mind worked. So if I was I was literally talking out loud.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that question. And I asked that in just real, genuine curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
People that I've spoken to who I dismiss, and so, for the listeners, I don't bring everybody who I speak to on for you to listen to as a listener. They are pretty easy to spot. What stands out when I listen to you speak is that you can remember an emotional reaction and emotional component to your conversation. The fairy being proud of you, you being sad that the interaction was going to end. These types of emotional reactions are difficult to fabricate as memories or fabricate as part of delusions. we tend to, at the end of our experiences, just in normal life, you go long enough away from something, you tend to remember the emotional feeling of the experience most. You know, you might forget the actual details of what that person said that made you feel so shitty, but 10 years from now, you'll definitely remember that Bob made you feel shitty, right?
Right.
And so we don't forget our emotional reactions to real events, is my experience. Also, I've been through a lot of traumatic events and I've had to overcome that. And one of the hardest parts about human experience is we don't forget our emotional reactions to real events.
I never even thought about that.
You know, I just say that to give you some reflection perhaps on, you know, the validity of your experience. You know, I certainly, in speaking with you, believe what you're saying because I can detect that quality of emotional component like I'm describing, but also you have no purpose for which to bring the story forward.
No.
There's you know, you're not releasing a book or anything of that nature.
No.
And you know, I think that many people listening might have their own realization just in this conversation that like fairy culture as it's presented is not exactly inclusive today in 2023. And so you know, it's interesting that you would have an experience that would sort of seemingly buck everything that someone might say informs a delusion, right? So here you're seeing someone that, you know, isn't a brown fairy, et cetera, et cetera. This adds validity in my judgment, which, you know, take that for what it means. It does add validity to what you're saying.
Well, thank you.
No problem. I'm trying to host this podcast in an attempt to learn and to also give people like yourself, like myself and others, a place where they can feel like not crazy, essentially. And, you know, along those lines, you know, I do want to sort of say that, you know, if I were to describe elements of my experience to the audience who's listening today, I would sound a similar way. And so for that reason, I can't really bring judgment into what I feel are authentic, you know, recounts that are being shared with me. Monique, I just have a few more questions before we wrap things up here tonight. One of the things that I'm really interested in is you mentioned that you had sort of had a sense that you had seen this fairy prior. But in the time that you do recall, when you did see it, was there I guess what I'm trying to ask is what did it feel like when you realized you were seeing a fairy, if you can recall that feeling so long ago?
Like normal. Like it didn't shock me. I don't know why I'm allowed to keep that memory and not, you know, go back to the other memories that I have. When I try and really strain my brain, it's like, well, maybe, you know, but it's such a push to try to bring it up. Like I literally don't remember anything else. But for some reason, this one memory, and like it felt very like even when the lights dimmed and she appeared, it was just like, oh hey, that's my friend. You know, it wasn't even like, you know, I just remember that kind of feeling, and I'm thinking of that feeling because like it's something my daughter, who's an adult now, but you know, it's certain things of how she would react. And that reminds me of like that feeling of, oh hey, that's my friend, you know. So it was kind of like that reaction. And in that way, I know I'd seen her before because me being sad, you know, at the news that she would not be coming back anymore was like, okay, you know. And I guess that's another thing that kind of baffled me over the years, like, well, what happened all those other times? Where was I? You know, what was I doing? What was going on prior to all of that? You know, and I just can't put my finger on any of it. Like, I don't even know why she told me she can't come back anymore. But I just know that this was the reality of the situation. And over the years I've revisited the whole fairy story. Like I had books in the early 90s and I would read about the Findhorn community and just like a lot of like fairy lore type of stuff, trying to kind of put the pieces together. Because like I said, who am I going to tell? Like in reality, most people, be you black, white, purple, whatever, you're not going to say, yeah, I can vibe with that story. Most people have never experienced anything to this degree. And fairy is such a like it's such a just off the wall type of topic. Hey, have you ever seen fairies? It's like, no, and so it's just not something that people talk about. So, but to answer your question again, yeah, it was just a normal day. Like it was a normal conversation, and it was just like one of my friends came in, and I'm like, hey, let's play. So,
Monique, thank you for all that information.
mhm.
And also just what you were saying at the end there is so correct. I mean, I'm hosting this podcast. I'm a man in his mid 40s telling people I've seen a fairy.
It's hard to come to terms with.
The looks that people give me,
Yes, I can imagine.
the vitriol that I have to deal with. It's like, and you know what? It's interesting. I'll say this: like, you tell somebody you saw a ghost, people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm a soul. I have a soul. The soul lives on after I die. I can totally understand a ghost. No problem." You tell people, "Listen, I saw like a UFO." People are like, it's a big universe. Of course, there's other life out there. We're not alone. No problem. You saw a UFO. You tell people you saw a fairy.
Yeah, yeah.
They think that, I mean, I've literally had people send me like self-help directive stuff for island mental health and things like that. So it's brave of you to speak about your experiences in honesty. And, I try to tell people that come on the podcast, we're not here to convince anybody of anything.
Right, right.
But there's an untold story going on.
There is.
Does not get adequate credibility and does not seem to have adequate research that's contemporary. This is my take.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just, you may not know this podcast, but for the listeners who will inevitably make sure that I do know about the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast with Joe Hickey Hall, and I've listened to every episode. It's wonderful. So there is a podcast being hosted out there about modern fairy sightings, but it tends to be, this is just my take on that particular podcast's approach to things. It tends to be reinforcing the idea that there's some sort of Irishy lore, folklore-y kind of justification or understanding for all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I lean more towards something like, this is a species. It might exist within a habitat that we have a hard time understanding, because for them the habitat is more like a quantum physics plane.
Right.
But that this is a real entity with sentience, like it knows who it is, it has independent thought, it's self-aware, and it is self-directed.
Mm-hmm.
So, this isn't like, I came across the spirit of the forest. This is like, no, I came across, like in your case, Sally, my fairy,
Mm-hmm.
And in my circumstance, it was an individual as well. And so this is where I'm trying to peel back the layers of understanding to the best of my humble ability as a guy with a microphone.
Well, it's a hard task, like you said, because, explicitly because people are less, I mean, it's not a lot of people who readily admit that this is happening. Like you said, ghosts, UFOs, there's a whole lot. Witchcraft, Wicca, whatever. There's, things that we can kind of wrap our heads around. But fairies is such a, now you're talking about, fairy tales, and now you're talking about storybooks, and it just doesn't seem rational. And that, by, I'm sure now you carry somewhat of a burden, that you have this story and you have to now live with it and come to terms with it and try to figure it out to the best of your ability. And that's a difficult task.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I want you to know that conversations like this one, and actually especially this conversation with you, Monique, are very helpful for me along that journey of understanding. For the listeners who don't know me, I have a background in activism. So when I believe something to be true and correct, and I lean into that very hard, and I hang my hat on causes that I really feel just about and I think are defensible. So as I enter my work here trying to figure out, well, what exactly are fairies and what did I see, and have others also seen these things, I'm trying to bring that same energy and effort of seriousness and dedication. So we'll see where this road goes, but so far so interesting, so far so fascinating, I guess I should say, in honor of the podcast name. I'll leave you with this question, if that's okay with you. So Monique, there's no wrong answer here. I ask everybody that I talk to who I intend to bring to air this question, and I definitely would like to publish this story. What do you think that fairies are? And as well, this isn't as important, but so what do you think they are, and where do they come from?
Okay. To give you the full answer, I turned 50 in 2 years ago. 2 years ago? 2 years ago. When I turned 50, it was like I was like a guy wanting a new red Corvette. It was like I wanted to change so much about me. I wanted to, like, who am I? Recalibrating everything about me so that I could enter this next half of my life with a completely different mindset, changing things according to what I learned in the first 50 years. And so I've looked at that question, because that to me was like the gateway drug, quote unquote, to other experiences that I've had. And so when I look back over the span of 50 some odd years, I'm thinking, okay, does any of this fit together? Are these isolated incidences? Am I just open, from the giddy up, from what I experienced in the South Bronx? Now I go here, I move to this state and this happens, and I move to this state and then this happens, and I move here to this house and this. It's like everywhere I go, there's a little bit of, high strangeness that follows me around. And what I have recently come to terms is similar to what you're thinking, in that there's a lot of interdimensional stuff going on. I say that because of some extraterrestrial thing that purely crossed my path by accident. Nothing I was looking for. No, I wasn't doing any of that CE5, trying to contact aliens and whatever. It was just something that randomly happened to me. And I was like wide awake when it happened. And it wasn't that I was abducted. It was, I don't know. I guess that's just a whole other really detailed story. But what I'm thinking, and as I'm looking back, is that there's something that's interdimensional. Like, we are in one dimension, and then there's another dimension here, and there's another dimension there, and there's another there's like dimensions, they're everywhere. And sometimes we maybe are at a certain frequency. Maybe we are, like, you were happy when you had your incident. Maybe there's a certain, I don't know what it is. I don't know what crosses it, what allows us to cross those paths. I don't know what allows us to maybe jump into a different timeline that allows us to see these things, but I don't think they're coming from out there. You know, when I say out there, I'm pointing to the sky or to the heavens or underneath the earth. I don't think they're coming from a physical place. I think they are overlapped on top of us. And sometimes, some way, somehow, which I'm literally trying to figure out right now, because like I said, I'm in my 50s, you know, and I'm trying to crack all the codes because I'm like, I don't know how much time I got left, but I need to figure some of this out before I go. But I sincerely think, this is just my opinion, that this is interdimensional. You know, I think at some point, I think if we figured it out, we could cross into that, or we could, or they can cross into, and we can see all of this with our physical eyes, not astrally, not in our imagination, but with our physical eyes, just like you have, just like I have. I think we can do that if we understood something with the quantum, you know, the quantum universe, and you know, all of that good stuff that's too technical to get into right now, but there's an answer to it. And that's just my opinion of where I think that's where a lot of things come from, in fact, not just fairies. I think that, you know, we can look up in the sky and see aliens, but what about those aliens who just walk through the walls? You know, are they really flying in to get us, or are they just walking in to get us from another dimension? So that's just my opinion.
I have a couple of chills at times there. Monique, I really want to let you know how much I appreciate this conversation.
Good.
I feel actually like kind of uplifted after talking with you. So
Good.
yeah, and I don't always feel that way after talking with people. Some of the conversations I have are kind of draining if they take me in a direction that I don't feel is true, for lack of a better word. And so I guess, with that final thought shared, which I am still forming my opinions much like you, but I tend to agree with the way your mind is traveling there. I do think that, as difficult and irrational as it may sound, there is a rationale for quantum physics as a baseline architecture for the understanding of these phenomena. One of the things that stands out is the duality of light, as both a particle and a wave, and the ability for, further down that rabbit hole, the existence of two particles in the same place at the same time, effectively, that are one. And so, if following the idea that light, we are light, like something that was pointed out to me in a previous conversation, I'll leave you with this thought as I start to sign off here. I was making a fire when I was talking to somebody, and they said, the sun, it beats down on the earth, and the tree grows from that sunlight. And later the tree falls and dries out, and you ignite it and release the very sunbeams and heat that it captured right into your stove to produce warmth for you. And the point being that people have no problem witnessing transformation of light into physical, back into light and warmth in front of their very eyes all day long. A tree is doing it, like a tree is literally doing it right in front of you. But it doesn't seem to connect as metaphysical because it seems so physical. But when you think about it in the terms I just described, lighting a fire is pretty crazy. You're basically reigniting captured sunlight.
That's true.
Isn't it interesting, right? And so
that is.
Yeah, so I really just want to again say thank you so much for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
For all of our human and non-human listeners tuning in tonight, a big thanks to Monique for coming on the Fascinating Fae podcast and sharing her experience with a fairy in New York City almost 50 years ago. Thank you again, Monique. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, on this place we call Earth now, who are we? And on this place we call Earth, why do we pick fruit from the forbidden tree? In the game of life, what am I? In the game of life, will I leave a mark before I die? So walk with me, baby, as the big picture rolls along. Well, I'm thinking maybe we are just some fragments, and there's questions in my mind, questions in my head. I question all the time, all that we've been living, that we've been living. So practice what you preach, and preach what you believe. It's entirely up to you. The thoughts that you conceive, you got to keep your inner fire. Don't let yourself tire, and let your mind travel to the place that you desire. So I'm singing, walk with me, baby, as the big picture rolls along. Well, I'm thinking maybe we are just some fragments, and there's questions in my mind, questions in my head. I question all the time, all that we've been led, that we've been la da 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 la da da la da 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 da.